I have a background in technology, and I have been working in the impact space, trying to delve upon the questions of leveraging data and technology for social impact for the past few years. So back in 2016, I was working with University of Chicago, and in particular a professor at the university, where we were looking at how do we solve the problem of water pollution in India. And the idea was that in order to be able to pinpoint pollutant sources, oftentimes we may not be relying on the best available methods to get the right data. So what we started thinking about is we launched a water quality monitoring portal called Water to Cloud. And our desire was to democratize access to water quality or water pollution data, and then in turn influence policymakers thinking in how do we get more real-time geotagged data. As most of you would know, traditionally, one is used to sort of looking at grab sampling or point data. And we said that, can we think of data in a more spaced out area? So we took geo marked data, we took data with a timestamp, and then we took data in real time. And we put all of that data through an AI automation platform where we kept this data onto an open public platform, right? So now, obviously, there is accountability associated with such data, but also the idea was to make it visually appealing and easy to understand through some of these data sets that are out there. So over the course of 4 years, in fact, we looked at data sets from India's major rivers, including Ganga, Yamuna, Godavari, and then started thinking about sort of where were the pollution sources coming in, who was responsible, and then how do we enable decision makers, policymakers, as well as implementers on using this data as a source for them to take action. So that was one example where we started working with different stakeholders across the both at the central level and the state level, and then helping them with such data into finding the source of pollution. Moving from there, when I joined Rockefeller Foundation about a couple of years back, I want to share another example, which is from Seva Bharat. And I'm sure a lot of you would know Seva Bharat as a grassroots organization, which is 1.9 billion women membership with them. The idea that Seva Bharat came to Rockefeller Foundation, where I was leading the data, tech, and innovation work for the past couple of years, was really thinking about sort of, one, how do they develop a data strategy for themselves, right? And for a grassroots organization to think of this question was really amazing, because that's where the issues have to begin with, right? So it's not about what data do I collect, what analysis do I perform. All that comes secondary. The idea really needs to start with, what is the problem I want to address, right? And then think about, do I need data for this? What is the data I need for this? What sort of mindsets do I need? What talent or what resources do I need within my organization? And that's an example that I think a lot of you may resonate with, including organizations working at the grassroots, as well as even on the funding side or think tanks, etc. The other part of that story was when Seva Bharat said that, hey, we have sort of these hundreds of thousands of lines of data sets on cumin farmers and cotton farmers, and we have actually never analyzed it, right? So we have this data, but we don't know what to do with it. And so Rockefeller Foundation supported them with some funding, with some sort of technical assistance, etc. And then we were looking at, how do we work with them to think about what can they do with this data, right? And that was an interesting exercise for Seva as well as Rockefeller, because here one was looking at what are the underlying issues with data, right? So as Seva started analyzing their data, they realized that maybe the quality wasn't that great. Maybe the data wasn't complete. Maybe the data wasn't collected at the right frequency. Maybe there were sort of very simple things, right? So for example, they would use a numerical value in a particular cell versus an alphabetical value in another cell, and then that doesn't help with the analysis, right? So these are practical problems that one realizes when one starts working with data. And that was an interesting example, personally, for me to see that how an organization at the grassroots level was beginning to think about a shift towards digital transformation, towards leveraging data and tech, not for reporting to funders, but for the end beneficiaries, for their own members there. And this also relates to a few things that the speaker before me, Shalu, was just talking about, where it is important to see issues from the eyes of the beneficiaries, right? So they wanted to see how does the data that a cotton farmer collects ultimately gives insights back to the cotton farmer, where they're able to then use it for making their lives better, right? So it could be increase in incomes, they have a better livelihood, etc. So there was the other example that was interesting to me when I was working there. Just a couple of weeks back, I've in fact joined data.org, where our mission is really to be able to democratize data science impact and talent as well as skills for the social sector. We and the idea is one that I think all of you are familiar with, where a lot of the data and tech mindset and talent really lies in the private sector, right? And there are a number of issues why this happens. A major one being that there's like limited data talent overall, and then given the kinds of salaries, given the kinds of acceptance that data talent would have in a private sector, there's very limited acceptance in the social sector at this stage, right? So data.org wants to be able to democratize the area of data science and really be able to drive partnerships at the global level to engage the data science stakeholders for the social impact. And we would include sort of the public sector as well as NGOs or CSOs into this space. And I feel like there's a huge role for various stakeholders, including CSR foundations, philanthropies, the public sector, governments, etc., in order to drive some of this change, right? So over the last year, data.org launched a inclusive growth and recovery challenge, and they selected 8 awardees out of a pool of 1,200, where they said that these are some of the use cases, and I would encourage you to look at data.org's website and see what these different entities are doing. It's great to see two of the 8 awardees are in fact working in India, right? And one of them strikes me, which is Bays, which has been working on cold chain storage for helping small holder farmers with regards to saving their crop from getting destroyed, right? It is interesting that in India, we have only about 6% of crops or food grains go through a cold storage system, whereas in developed countries such as the US, etc., it's over 60%, right? And so here's where the gap lies, and they're working on this, where they're working with farmers to help them think about what if they have data in on their phone in an app where they can see how long their fruits or vegetables will stay well and not get destroyed, then they are able to then work with them towards getting them to think about how long can they survive with these crops, right? So these were 3 examples which I quickly wanted to present. I know we're going to be at time, so just want to mention that it's great to see that different organizations, social impact organizations within India as well as abroad, are looking at this change where we are able to see how organizations can leverage data and tech for their own program design as well as their own internal analytics to move forward. And what one really needs is a few different things, right? Like data talent is one problem which needs to be addressed, which is where sort of my work, where I lead the Capacity Accelerator Network at data.org, where we are trying to see how do we have 1 million data-driven professionals into the social impact sector in the next 10 years, is going to come, is going to be critical. But I also feel like organizations need to build their own infrastructure. They need to have a strategy. They need to have a culture and really have leadership drive some of these changes, which is where I would encourage a lot of you to be to take action and drive this from the leadership end. I'll stop here and see if there are any questions, or I'll pass it back to Sparsh. Thanks so much.